Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 6 of Chicks and Sticks, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. My name is Melissa Boyd, and I'm once again joined by my esteemed fellow writers, Kristy Flannery, Hannah Garfield, and Mariah Holland. If you're enjoying our show, make sure you drop us a like, a follow, or a comment from wherever you're watching or listening. And send in your questions, and we'll be sure to answer them in a future episode. Without further ado, tonight, we are so excited to welcome NHL Network host Jackie Redmond. Thanks for being here, Jackie.
I'm so excited to be here. It's nice to just hang out and talk hockey with all ladies. I'm so pumped.
Well, us too. We're so excited that you're here. We were going to pick your brain, that's for sure. So,
all right. Well, listen, no promises that I'll deliver on everything that you have, but we can hang out. That's for sure.
Awesome. So I don't want to waste any more time, actually. So I'm chatting too much here. So I'll let Hannah jump in and start us off with the first question.
Yeah, so I feel like it's only fitting to start with talking a little bit about Boston after the Boston Islanders series last night. So Boston obviously made a splash at the trade deadline with getting Taylor Hall, and he had a great regular season with 8 goals in 16 games and then kind of faded away in the playoffs. I personally think that they should re-sign him, but I'm curious to see if you think that the Bruins should sign him to an extension.
Well, I think he was a heck of a fit, right? I don't think anyone is denying that Hall, Krejci, and Smith line was pretty formidable for the most part over the second half of the season. And even in the first series, I would say as well for the Boston Bruins. I think there's never an issue signing Taylor Hall. Like, I know people look at his time in Buffalo and are like, that sucked. But I mean, everything sucks in Buffalo. So you can't really hold it against him. So I think it would be great for Boston to sign him, but I think they have bigger issues, honestly. They have to figure out if Tuukka Rask is coming back. I just mentioned David Krejci. He's a UFA as well. So is he going to stay in Boston? If so, how much is that going to cost the Boston Bruins to keep him there? And then I think we saw in the game last night, like the Bruins got exposed on the back end. No Brandon Carlo, no Kevin Miller. And, I love Matty Grzelcyk. He was on our show last week. Really nice dude, but it was not a good look for him last night. And I think that goes for the whole squad back there, save for Charlie McAvoy. I think they need to address that and figure it out because I don't think there's enough depth there. So I think that should actually be their first priority, is to deal with their goaltending. Obviously, that goes without saying. And then their defense. And then, if you have time to chat with Taylor Hall and he wants to stay there, then of course he's a hell of a player and he's not going to hurt your lineup. But, he may want to test the market and see what other offers that he can muster as well. So they might want to sign him, but if someone else throws a ton of money and term at him, he might be like, you know what? It was fun for a minute, but I'm going to go here. So to answer your question, anybody would love to have Taylor Hall on their team, I would think, especially the way that he played. He made some great defensive plays as well this postseason. So he's a great player, but I think the back end is the issue for Boston.
I wholeheartedly agree that game last night was a disaster.
Wasn't great.
So switching to the Islanders, do you think they're going to be a challenge for the Tampa Bay Lightning, or do you think the Bolts will move right past them like they did with the Canes?
I do think the Islanders are going to be a challenge for Tampa. As much as Tampa has looked amazing and they're healthy, so healthy, it's scary. They're actually better than they were last year in the Eastern Conference Final against the Islanders. But a lot of people forget that last year in that conference final, the Islanders had so many things working against them. They had Game 7 against Philly. They fly across the country, play Game 1 48 hours later. They get absolutely destroyed in that game. But they had also played an entire extra round because they had to qualify while Tampa was just like playing shinny for fun and figuring things out. So, it was a tired team by the time they got to Tampa. They started behind the 8 ball because that first game, much like Vegas's first game, was a bit of a write-off. Vegas's game against Colorado was a bit of a write-off. And then Cizikas only played 2 out of 6 games in that series. And if you watch the Islanders, he's hugely important to them. Pelech missed a game late in the series, which also hurt them. So I do think that there was a lot going against the Islanders that year. And I'm a big believer in intangibles. And I think that last year's deep run was beneficial for them. I think they learned a lot about themselves and they've looked really good. So I think it's going to be a series. It might be Tampa's toughest test to date because of the structure that New York plays. Like Carolina was a great test, but Carolina was so banged up that it wasn't really a fair fight, I don't think, for the Hurricanes. But for the Islanders, I do think they are going to give Tampa their toughest challenge thus far.
Who has the better bottom six, the Islanders or the Lightning?
Girl, what are you doing to me right now?
I know. I'm there.
The bottom six for the Islanders was so huge against Boston, but I think it was more so a case of Boston not having the type of depth that we thought they might. I think the bottom six for the Islanders outscored Boston's like 10-1 or something in that series, which is outrageous. Islanders fans are going to hate me for this, but I'm going to say offensively, I give the edge to Tampa just because last year that Blake Coleman line, and I know Kristy, I know you know all about Coleman. That line was just so big for Tampa. So I'm curious to see what happens with the bottom six forwards for the Islanders against Tampa, because they are good players. And a guy like Casey Cizikas is actually pretty skilled and can score when he has the opportunity, but that's not really the role of his line. So I give the edge to the defending champs. That's often going to be my crutch, is just to go there. But I do think it's going to be a hell of a series personally. And I've been saying since the halfway point of the season, like, don't sleep on the New York Islanders because they're really good. So I see a long series here.
All right, now let's go a little bit north to Toronto.
Do we have to?
We do. I have to. So you're obviously an unbiased Maple Leafs fan.
Of course.
But if Tavares doesn't get injured in game one, is the outcome of that series the same?
I don't know if the outcome is different, but I don't think it's the same, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not sure the Leafs win the series with Tavares in the lineup, but I do think that was a massive, massive, massive blow to the lineup, not just because you're missing Tavares and all of the things that he brings, but because it exposes other areas of your lineup, like Willie Nylander and Alex Galchenyuk having a bit of a coming out party in that series. Like, that was great and it was fun. And I'm really happy for Nylander because he's a bit of a whipping boy in Toronto, or he was. But it just exposes other guys that, you know, you might think are great, but when they go from being in a third line role to being in a second line role, things get a lot harder. And Montreal, the second they started relying heavily on their top four D-men and playing a little bit differently, it made things easier for them that they only had to shut down Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. And lucky for them, Sheldon Keefe didn't really want to break those two up. So I think that benefited Montreal. I'm not happy with Sheldon Keefe and his lack of adjustments in that series. That's my cards on the table analysis. But, to get back to my point, I just think that any team in the league, you can shut down the likes of Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, you're giving yourself a good chance to win the game. And I think we're seeing something similar with Colorado. No Nazem Kadri in the second line. He's most famous for his suspensions, but he's actually like a really great player when he's not breaking the rules and hurting people. So him out of the lineup for Vegas, they're like, listen, if we can shut down the McKinnon line, we'll take our chances the rest of the way. Yeah. And I think for the Toronto Maple Leafs, the lack of Tavares was just such a big blow. It was tough to overcome. They still should have closed out the series. Like, you're up 3-1, like that, you should close that out. But I think it's a completely different ball game if Tavares is in the mix, because it just creates more problems throughout the lineup for Montreal to have to deal with. And it keeps guys lower in the lineup in the bottom six to not get so exposed in long games in certain situations. So yeah, I do think it would be different.
Well, speaking of Montreal, I have to ask you about Montreal. I live here and I cover the team for the Hockey Writers. So you can imagine how much of a party it is here right now. And, we've had a tough go with COVID in Quebec. So it's kind of a nice thing that's happening right now.
Nice
but
distraction.
Do you, obviously, they're on a 7-game win streak. Carey Price is back in a big way. Do you think their Cinderella run can continue and they upset either Vegas or Colorado? Do you think that's
it's going to be, I will say, it's going to be a completely different level. I think we all know that against a Colorado or a Vegas, and I think it will be Vegas. It's hard because I think that once you've been through 2 rounds and you've built this swagger and this confidence, and then you have a guy like Carey Price playing like playoff level Carey Price, which is out of this world. I mean, you have a puncher's chance, right? Like anybody does. We've all seen the craziness that can happen in the playoffs. That's part of what I love about hockey. One unlucky bounce, one key injury, one bad penalty at the wrong time in the wrong game, and everything changes. So yeah, of course Montreal has a chance. I'm not going to go like bet my house on it, but I do think that they, you know, I've said this before, they've caught a couple of big breaks. Like no Tavares for the Leafs was big. No Scheifele by his own doing for the Jets was big. I think DeMello being out of the lineup for the Jets, another huge deal. Although that's kind of indicative of like maybe needing to address your blue line when like DeMello being out is a huge blow. That's a problem. No disrespect to him. But yeah, so they have caught a couple breaks, but I also think they're a different team than what we saw in the second half. And I'm sure Melissa, like watching them night in and night out in the regular season, like this isn't the same team.
No.
Like for whatever reason, like Cole Caulfield, Kakaniemi, Toffoli, like Suzuki, all of these guys, like they've got something right now. And it's that intangible swagger and confidence. Like they're not scared. And I think when you have nothing to lose and everybody's betting against you, that's a dangerous thing. And all the pressure is going to be on whoever they play. So if they keep going out there and playing, you know, structurally sound the way that they did against Winnipeg. I'm still trying to figure out like if Winnipeg was terrible or if Montreal was just really that great at keeping them to the outside. Cause I was like, how like in an elimination game is Winnipeg invisible? Like, I don't get it, but I give Montreal all the credit in the world. And I do think that they are playing absolutely with house money, and that is scary. If I'm the opposition, I'm like, man, these guys don't care. They're fine. Like nobody's getting fired if they lose to Vegas in the Final Four. Like that's not happening.
Would you say that there's the underdogs of the postseason as far as all the teams that are left?
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
Which is crazy.
They're probably the biggest underdog coming in, save for maybe Nashville, but you could argue because coming into the playoffs, Nashville had Saros playing just disgusting that they weren't really an underdog. Like Montreal, like nobody gave them a chance. And so they are the ultimate underdog. I took Vegas in the bracket challenge, like all the way to win the cup. But part of me, like I travel for the cup final, and part of me is like, oh, it'd be like really cool to go to Montreal. Like I've never been to the Bell Center. I know it's a bit different because of COVID and everything, but I'm like, oh man, I'd really love to like go hang out in Montreal though and like eat poutine and watch hockey. That'd be great.
Well, I hope that happens. No, for sure. Another reason I hope that happens.
Well, like Melissa, I have to talk about my team, which is the Minnesota Wild, and of course, Kaprizov. Do you think them quietly coming into the top 10 in the league was a fluke, or do you think this is the start of something?
Well, first off, I have to say that Wild fans are mad at me right now. I am in the Minnesota doghouse because earlier this year I went on this huge tangent about Robertson in Dallas being a legit threat for the rest of the year. And I stand by my claims, but they did not like that in Minnesota. I still hear about it, actually. Like, I'll still get tweets like, how do you feel about that Robo take? And I'll be like, did you watch him at the World Championships? Because he was pretty great. No, but to be more serious, I don't think that they were a fluke as a team. I think they have some really good pieces there. I think maybe I don't think they played to the level they could prior to this season. And I think that because of that, people kind of tapered their expectations. But I think Kaprizov has completely changed the dynamic of the team. I mean, he's exciting to watch. He's fun to watch, which has made it feel like they're playing differently. And I don't know that that's the case, but I think that energy, that it factor, like that charisma, that rubs off on people around you. He obviously has chemistry on the team as well, but I do think that they're legit. I think I did question their goaltending for a long time. I feel bad about that, but I know I'm not alone. I think though in the postseason, I do think that he proved that, you know, when the going gets tough or it gets more pressure and there's things on the line, I do think that he has proven himself to maybe really be a legit starter. So that's huge for Minnesota if that's the case. We'll see. next year, I find it hard to get a read on some of these teams because they only played a handful of other teams all year. And so it's like, okay, I need to see this team get out of their division and see what happens. But I do think that based on, they can only play the games they play against the teams that are on their schedule. And for that, I just don't think that I don't think it was fluke. I don't.
Can I ask a follow-up question about Minnesota?
Sure.
My boy, Zach Parise. I can go on a whole tangent with this. What does Minnesota do with him? Because clearly his contract has not aged well.
Well, yeah. I mean, I love the whole like bad contract thing because any of us would accept a contract like that in a heartbeat. I'd be like, yep, give it to me. If I don't live up to it, that's your fault. Like, whatever.
Bad judgment on you.
Yeah. You played yourself. Like, what do you want? But I mean, we all age. So that should really, especially the way he plays, right? Like, I think the writing could have been on the wall just because of the type of player that he is. Yep. He's an interesting situation because it was a rocky season for him. I mean, in the lineup, out of the lineup, even in the postseason. But I think that, I know it's a small sample size, but when he came into the lineup and had an impact in the first round, I think that speaks volumes to the fact that while he may be a player that's on a bad contract and who deals with injury and is a little bit longer in the tooth, he can still be impactful in the right spot. So for me, he's still a quality player in the right lineup, in the right role. So it just depends if Minnesota sees him as such on their team moving forward. Does that make sense?
If they find a trade partner that would take on that contract, where would he fit in?
First, you got to find me someone that wants to take on that contract and how they're going to make it work. Then we can talk about if he fits. But I do think like he is, I'm going to sound like a walking cliche right now, but he is built for the playoffs, right? Like he is a guy that hangs out in the dirty areas, gets in front of the net, makes life miserable, and, scores dirty goals. And that's what you need in the postseason. I mean, I'm a Leaf fan and I was like, can somebody just please get to the net and do something? And we've seen Corey Perry with the Montreal Canadiens, right? Like people thought that guy was done 3 years ago. Like this guy can't play in this league anymore, but he finds a good spot in Dallas. He has a good spot in Montreal now where he understands his role. He doesn't have to do everything, but if you're going to be if Corey Perry's in front of the net and there's a loose puck, like there's a good chance that he's going to get it. And so I do think that Parise, they're different players, but I think is similar in the sense that he's still serviceable as a player. It's a matter of where he can fit in that way, be used in the right role, and also not completely ruin a team with his contract.
I feel like that's a good place to kind of pivot to the offseason more. And I feel like it's already like kind of shaping up to be an interesting offseason. And we already kind of touched upon Parise, Rask, Krejci. But kind of the two big names that are being circulated are Jack Eichel and Seth Jones. Where are they playing next year?
Jack Eichel won't be in Buffalo, I don't think. I don't think either side of that wants anything to do with the other. It's just Jack Eichel, and I know he takes a lot of flack, and I get it. I get why fans get frustrated, and I get why Jack Eichel's frustrated. But that relationship between the team and the player is just so tense and sour on so many levels. Like there's the disagreement about how to deal with his injury. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back, I think. But there's the lack of success. There's all these different factors that come into play. And I just think both sides are done with it. I don't know that relationship can be repaired. The question is, Buffalo's front office needs to find a way to make Jack Eichel's trade value go up, because we all know he's an amazing player. He's Jack friggin' Eichel. 2 years ago, he was like in the Hart conversation. He's great. No denying that. But I think when your cards are on the table, when everybody knows your situation, that the player wants out, that you want the player out, then that's not a good spot to be when you're trying to make a deal. And so that's kind of the big task in front of Buffalo right now, is to figure out a way to make to find a way to make it so that they get back what Jack Eichel is actually worth. Like a few years ago, it feels like a few years ago, it was actually a really long time ago, but like Roberto Luongo, right? And his like, oh, like my contract sucks. And like they sign what's his face, I'm blanking on the name right now, that was going to be their number one, and Corey Schneider, Eddie Lack, which one was it? Anyway,
Schneider, that was his
Schneider. So Roberto Luongo's like, my contract sucks. Everybody knew that they had to deal Roberto Luongo and he wasn't going to be on the team anymore. And it was hard for them to figure that out because everybody and their mother knew the situation that they were in. So I think it's a similar situation with Jack Eichel. With Seth Jones, Columbus better trade him. And I don't say that because I don't like Seth Jones, but they can't lose him for nothing. And I think Jarmo Kekalainen knows that. He's a really good player. They could get a lot back for him. Yeah. So they have to deal him. And I think they got to deal him like as soon as possible.
Do you think, I mean, we talked about it earlier a little bit with the Bruins and their defensive core. Would Seth Jones be a good fit in Boston?
I mean, Seth Jones is the type of player that anybody wants on their team. It's a matter of how does that impact your salary cap moving forward? Because like Seth Jones is going to be looking for a payday. The guy is going to reference the bubble and playing 1,000 minutes in one game and like all of these different things. So I don't know Boston's cap situation off the top of my head, but I feel like it might be tough for them, but I'd have to look at it. But of course, I mean, the one that my wonderful co-host at NHL Network wants to see is perhaps a Seth Jones for Mitch Marner, some sort of deal there where, you know, I love Mitch Marner. I feel really bad for him that he's taking all the heat for the postseason, but it's a tense situation there as well. But apparently Kyle Dubas doesn't want to trade him. So we'll see, but that would be crazy if we had like a Toronto Columbus, like big name for big name deal. Obviously other pieces involved, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, continuing with the off season, we have to talk about Seattle and the expansion draft. Okay. Who or what will be the biggest surprise during that?
It's a great question. I don't know. I would say this. I would say after the Vegas expansion draft, I really hope that GMs have their crap together because there are some people that came out of that situation looking not very good. So I have to imagine that front offices have been doing their homework and trying to figure out how to navigate who to protect, who not to protect, and all of that stuff. And I think that's why we're going to see certain players who are UFAs that you're like, why is this person like still a UFA? This doesn't make any sense. Like Ovechkin comes to mind. Like, because if you wait until after, like if a player is unsigned, then you can sign them after and you can protect somebody else. So that's the type of stuff that intrigues me the most is like, okay, how are certain teams going to navigate this situation? But in terms of biggest surprise, I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen there, but I'm excited to watch it.
Well, here's an idea with my New Jersey Devils.
Lay it on me.
I think that PK Subban would be a phenomenal player for Seattle. He has the Norris Trophy. He has the hardware. He has the personality. He has the social media presence to really like help a new city out. Who do you think that would be realistic? Because let's be honest, PK Subban being on New Jersey makes no sense. Like they're not winning a cup anytime soon. Like the whole roster is under 24 years old. Like he should be moving on to greener pastures.
Listen, I hear about the Devils all the time. I work with Ken Danico. I hear nothing but ranting about that team. But you know, it's interesting because I do think you bring up good points in terms of the intangible things. Like you're building a team, you want a marketable player, you want a player that's going to give an identity, so to speak, to the team. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury was that for Vegas, however many years ago that was now, 4 years ago. And so I get your point. My fear with PK Subban, and I love the guy, he has been nothing but good to me, is that he just doesn't stay anywhere for very long. It's like, why does this guy just constantly move? Like Nashville for a few years, now he's in New Jersey, and it's only going to be a handful of years. So I would be more like, okay, if we're going to get PK Subban on this team, how do we ensure that he's going to commit to the team, not just in terms of the length of his contract, but also just, you know, PK's got a lot going on and I love him for it. Like, yo, like get that bag, like do it, get yours. But I do think that there is this reputation that follows him. And I think if he goes to Vegas, you have to make sure like, okay, this guy's here. Like he's not going to wear out his welcome in a few years. I'm not saying that he has in New Jersey. I'm just saying that, you know, he's bounced around a little bit.
Well, we like to end, the tradition on Chicks and Sticks is we like to end the show with a bit of a rapid fire round. Okay. So we will start with Mariah has the first question for rapid fire.
Who would you build your franchise around, McKinnon or McDavid?
Okay, I am just going to get so much hate for this, but I'm going to say Nathan McKinnon only because he's a Nova Scotia boy and I'm a Nova Scotia girl. So I just got to stick to my roots and go with Nathan freaking McKinnon. And I hope he shows up tonight for his sake. We've had too many superstars get shut down this postseason and not figure it the hell out. So Nate, you need to get on the board tonight. That's like, come on, bro.
All right. The next one is, which NHL city is the most underrated and needs to be on everyone's bucket list?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Which NHL city is the most underrated? Oh, man. Okay. I would have said Vegas a few years ago, but I think the cat's out of the bag there. You know, Columbus, the fan base in Columbus is really, really passionate about their team. And I just constantly feel bad for them. Everybody leaves, nobody stays. They can't hang on to anyone. It honestly, like, I'm not even saying this for entertainment value. Like, it genuinely pisses me off because it's a small market. I want the game to be as big and as good as possible. And it just sucks that a fan base that is so loyal and dedicated to their teams just keeps watching superstars walk away. And I hope that we can see that change because it's been happening since Rick Nash left. And I've been rooting for Columbus as like a heart underdog pick for so long ever since then. So I just feel bad for them. And I think that I think most people outside of like people that cover the sport day to day don't realize how big the fan base there actually is.
And what is your go-to game day accessory?
Game day, like if I'm going to a game?
Yep.
Well, you know, for me, it's just finding a small enough bag that fits all my stuff that's not annoying. Like all the rules now in different arenas were like clear bag, can't be this big. Whoa, like I just can't. I need like someone needs to create like a game day purse for women that just the perfect size. It meets all the requirements. You can take it to any sporting event, hockey, football, whatever, and it will be allowed in, but also not be obnoxiously big or obnoxiously small because some bags are too small.
It is true. Which coach would you hire to lead your team, Trotz or Torts?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I have to go with Barry Trotz because I call him my life coach because I just think he's so wise. And we had some great conversations during 2018 when the Capitals went on their run to the Stanley Cup. So for me, he's just like somebody that he believes in you, you know, like I talk to Barry Trotz about hockey and I'm like, he believes in me. Like you know what I mean? He gives everybody a fair shake. He's a good dude. And I can just see why teams buy into what he sells because he's just got this air about him that is, he's smart, he knows how to motivate you, and he actually cares about you. That being said, I love John Tortorella, and it is actually like I have a bucket list that I write that's written out, and on the bucket list is have a beer with John Tortorella. Like that needs to happen in my life. Like how many donations do I need to make to his animal charity? I'll do it. I just want one beer so I can hear Torts tell stories. So to answer your question, Trots, but I want to like be boys with Torts.
And we'll finish up with which two teams do you think make it to the Stanley Cup final and who wins?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna stick to my original guns here that Vegas is gonna go to the Cup final and win. I will say that they are going to face, you know what? I'm just gonna be scandalous. I'm gonna say the New York Islanders. I'm gonna say Vegas. I'm gonna say Golden Knights, Islanders, but Vegas wins.
All right, you heard it here first.
Listen, you got to have a hot take once in a while.
Of course. Well, that's the perfect way to end the show, with a hot take. Love it.
I do what I can for society.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us. We know you're really busy right now with the playoffs and everything, so we really appreciate you taking the time out to join us.
Well, thank you for having me. I had a great time. I flew by, which is always the best indication of the show. So.
And thank you to all of you for watching or listening. And be sure to check out all of the great shows that are being produced by the Hockey Writers on YouTube, Facebook, and your favorite podcast platform. We're up to about 9 weekly shows now, including Chicks and Sticks. So make sure you check them all out. We're also on iHeartRadio now as well. And we're all of us, Kristy, Hannah, Mara, and myself are writing articles on hockeywriters.com. So make sure you check those out as well. And last but not least, make sure you're signed up for our morning skate newsletter to get all of your latest hockey fix to your inbox every day. And Kristy, of course, is a major part of that team. So one more reason to sign up. So,
also follow Jackie Redmond.
Yes, that's right. Of course. How could I forget? I'm gonna forget.
At Jackie Redmond on Instagram, at Jackie_Redmond on Twitter.
Perfect way to make sure you do that. We're gonna make it. Please do that. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Take care and see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.